Good morning, Harvest Kids. Good morning, everyone. It's Mr. Carlos and Eddie, and we're here today with this week's Bible story. Eddie, you looking forward to the story? Oh, boy, am I ever, Mr. Carlos. You know I love Bible stories. Well, me too, Eddie. I can't wait. Well, boys and girls, this morning's story is called Adam and Eve Disobey God. And it's story number 3 from the Gospel Story Bible. So let's get ready to get right to it. What do you say, Eddie? Great idea, Mr. Carlos. I can't wait. All right, Eddie, let's get ready. So today's story, boys and girls, is from the book of Genesis, chapter 3, verses 1 through 24. Eddie, take it away. You got it, Mr. Carlos. The wonderful time that the man and the woman enjoyed living with God in the Garden of Eden didn't last very long at all. Satan came into the garden in the form of a serpent who wanted to trick them. He went to the woman and tempted her to eat the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Wow, Mr. Carlos. Wasn't that the tree that God said they shouldn't eat from? Yes, Eddie, you're absolutely right. Last week we learned that God said you can eat from any tree in the garden except from that tree, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Good memory, Eddie. Thank you, Mr. Carlos. Wow, that sneaky snake. That was the only tree God said they should not eat from. If they did, they would die. But the serpent lied to the woman. He said, Mr. Carlos? Yes, Eddie? Do you mind playing the role of the serpent? No, Eddie, I can do that. Thank you. The serpent said, you won't really die. What God said isn't true. What will really happen is that you will become like God. Wow. The woman believed Satan's lie. She disobeyed God, took some of the fruit, and ate it. She made a terrible decision when she disobeyed God. Then, to make it even worse, she gave some fruit to Adam, who was with her. He ate it and disobeyed God too. Wow, Mr. Carlos. What does disobey mean? Well, that's a good question. When you disobey, that means you don't do what you were told to do. You do something different or the opposite of what you were told. Thank you, Mr. Carlos. As soon as they realized what they had done, Adam and his wife were ashamed. They took some leaves and tried to make clothes for themselves to cover their nakedness. Later on, when God came walking in the garden, they were afraid and tried to hide from him. But you can't hide from God, and you can't hide your sin from God either. God went after Adam and asked him why he disobeyed. Adam didn't have a very good answer. He blamed his wife. And when God asked the woman why she disobeyed, she blamed the serpent. Wow, Mr. Carlos. Isn't that just like us? That's a very good point, Eddie. Yeah, a lot of times we don't like to take responsibility for our actions and we blame other people, just like Adam and Eve did way back then. Wow. God cursed the serpent for what he had done. Then God told the woman there would be bad consequences for disobeying him. Now it would be painful when she had babies. and instead of getting along happily with her husband, she would want to rule over him. It would be hard for them to get along. God put a curse on the ground and told Adam that from now on, farming would be hard work. The weeds would fight against him. God also said that one day they would return to the dust of the ground. That meant Adam and his wife would die. That's what God had said would happen right from the beginning. God was the one who told them the truth, not the serpent. That's a great point, Mr. Carlos. Yeah, it's a very good point, Eddie. It was the serpent who lied. God cannot. He always tells the truth. Wow. This was a very sad day. God sent the first two people out of the garden he had made for them and placed an angel to guard to keep them out. But in the midst of the sadness, God gave them a great hope. When God was cursing the serpent, he said that someday the woman would have children, and one of her children would crush the serpent's head. Satan would be defeated. When Adam heard that promise and understood that they would live to have children, he gave his wife the name Eve. This name meant that she would be the mother of everyone who would ever live. Did you know that God gave Adam and Eve some clothes made of animal skins to cover their nakedness? There was a secret promise in those first clothes. To make them, God had to sacrifice an animal. That pointed to the day in the future when Jesus, God's only Son, would be born into the world. He would come as a son in the family of Adam, a far, far off great-great-great-grandchild of Adam and Eve. Jesus would die on the cross and be punished for the sin of Adam and those who would trust in Jesus, so they could once again be in a relationship with God. And Jesus would be the one to defeat Satan, just as God did. Wow, Mr. Carlos. Even though it was a sad day, God turned it around for good. That's usually what he does, Eddie. It's absolutely right. It was a sad day, boys and girls, when the first man and the first woman, Adam and Eve, disobeyed God. But in the end, God wins. So that's today's story. Before we leave, Eddie, what do you say we go over some questions about the story? That's a great choice, Mr. Carlos. Well, let's do it. Okay, boys and girls, we're ready for the questions. First question is, why are Adam and Eve outside of the garden? Mr. Carlos, do you know? Yes, Eddie. Remember, boys and girls, from the story, God sent Adam and Eve out of the garden when they chose not to obey God, and instead they chose to listen to the sneaky serpent. That's right, Mr. Carlos. Bad choice. I agree, Eddie. That was a bad choice. Next question, boys and girls. What are Adam and Eve wearing in the picture? Mr. Carlo? Yes, Eddie. Well, they are wearing the clothes that God made for them out of animal skins to cover their nakedness. You see, boys and girls, when we choose to do things our way instead of God's way, that's called sin. And the payment for sin is death.
Adam and Eve's clothes remind us of this truth, but they also point us to Jesus, whose death paid the price for sin once and for all. So all we need to do is believe that Jesus is who he says he is, God's one and only Son, who takes away the sin of the world, and follow him by doing what he teaches us in the Bible.
Wow, Mr. Carlos, that was well said.
Thank you, Eddie. So, boys and girls, hope you enjoyed today's Bible story. We look forward to being with you all again next time. But until then,
You are loved.